Friday episode of the Dollarman Bandits. I'm Orrin Phillips, and we have a phenomenal show for you today. We have brothers on. We have Caleb and Nathan Harms, the Harms brothers. They are putting out some really wonderful independent books, usually for teens and preteens. They put out a book called My Dad the Dork. I saw it, and I got it for my kids as sort of a joke, and I absolutely fell in love with this book. So did my children as well. It is a love letter to us comic fans, sci-fi fans, toy fans, anything, all that we are, and the relationships we have either with our parents or with our children. Such a wonderful book. And it's so cool to have these independent creators on to hear about how they are adapting and how they are surviving in this changing independent community. And the Harms brothers are doing a fantastic job of it. So here we go, Nathan and Caleb Harms. Caleb and Nathan Harms. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time to talk.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
No problem. So we'll start from the very beginning. How did you guys first discover comics?
Comics. Okay, well, I'll let you take this one first, Caleb.
Well, he actually introduced me to comics, kind of at a young age. And, I was not a big reader growing up. Like, I was homeschooled, and my mom just, it was a challenge for her getting me to read just about anything. And like a lot of kids, comics kind of helped me to get into books just in general. And then as I started growing up and started getting into learning what I enjoyed doing, I gravitated towards drawing. And I thought, hey, I like these books and I like all these, superhero characters and everything. I should give that a shot. Like I can make my own comic because it's like, as a kid or as any kind of creative, you start thinking about like, well, how can I tell a story? Do I want to make a movie? Do I want to, write a novel? Like, what do I want to do? And it can be hard to start with all those things. Whereas with comics, you can just go. You can grab a piece of paper and a pencil, start drawing, even if you're not very good, like I was at the beginning. And you can just go and have fun with it. And I just kind of didn't stop.
Yeah. I mean, I think for myself, I was actually more into literature before I was into comics. That happened later in life. But as far as comics go, I mean, that was like a treat to go to the grocery store with my mom and see like some like dark saga Star Wars comic that took place after Return of the Jedi. And suddenly there's like cussing and blood in it and stuff like that. And you're like, whoa, what is this? It's like so much darker. Um, and so that kind of introduced me to a whole medium. And I think really the first thing we collaborated on as far as comics goes is a comic that'll never see the light of day, ever. We have the only two copies. It was something called the Requiem Death Chronicles.
Okay.
And it was a zombie book, essentially, that I'd written. I think I'd actually written it as a screenplay originally because I was thinking like something like that. I like zombie movies and so on. And then he took it at a young age when he was really first starting to draw and tried to do a comic for it. It's not very good. It's fine.
Well, we worked on it for like a couple of years on and off in there, just like as a for fun thing. Never really finished it.
No.
But we enjoyed the collaboration. Just like, oh, look at this. Oh, you brought my character to life.
Right.
They look super derpy, but that's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Are there steps? I'll start with you, Caleb. Along the way that you can look at and say these are sort of milestone points or evolutionary points that my art has changed and I've sort of grown as an artist.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember when I was, again, pretty young at this point, maybe like 13 or so. I was still drawing. I was doing some like fan art comics. And I remember actually having a conversation with my dad, and he's like, you should just like try to actually do this like as your full-time thing. You should try to study for this. And he actually helped me out with finding me a local small like art school just run by like one guy who was teaching private lessons. Name is Zach Hennessy. He like kind of went out to California for a time, learned how to do comics professionally. And so I went to that and learned from essentially this like very small trade school for a while. And that really helped me improve. I met other artists there. So, you know, I got to meet the community and other people that were interested in what I was. And that like really helped me get like the passion for it and learn all the basics. And then from there, of course, there was a lot of self-teaching, going onto YouTube and just Googling, you know, how to draw this, and having a lot of fun with that. And then I think one of the big things that like kept us going and kind of keep motivated was we would always go to conventions. We would go to Comic Cons and different local comic conventions. And I always remember thinking like, oh, that seems so cool. You have all these people, you know, on the other side of the booths selling their stuff and their art prints. I'm like, that's where I want to be. That's so cool. And then it was just like a progression from there. And when we started actually doing our own books, when we started doing the children's books, that just kind of that actually happened on a dare where we were just like hanging out one day. And you know, we were talking about like what we want to do for the future. He was in music at the time, and again, I was studying to do comic books, kind of more darker traditional superhero stuff. And for some reason, like we started talking about kids' books. He had become a father recently. And we were like, oh yeah, you could write a kid's book. Oh yeah, you could draw a kid's book. And we just kind of like challenged each other. And then we walked away for like 10 minutes. You know, I made a sketch, he wrote a little script of something, and we like shared it with each other. And we're like, hey, this is pretty good. This is kind of fun. Let's do this.
And I think that that original script was 90% there of what the first book
It really was.
ended up being.
Hmm.
It just kind of came naturally
Mhm.
to both of us.
Hmm.
Um, just as a passion project. It was really easy. It just felt very fluid, very organic to work together.
Hmm.
And Nathan, for you as a storyteller, as a writer, how have you sort of evolved writing and putting a tale together?
You know, I always wanted to be a writer when I was younger. I think a lot of people do. Um, but I wanted to be the romanticized version of a writer who just sat down, just typed something up and was like, oh, there's a story. It's leading off by itself. It's dancing on its own. It's becoming its own thing. And really just writing by the seat of my pants. And of course, like most people who try to write like that, you end up with a bunch of unfinished scripts and stories and so on because you write yourself into a corner. And so the baby steps of transitioning from writing music to writing kids' books um, felt very organic in the sense that it's a shorter format. So to get from A to B to C is a lot easier to do with a really simple outline. And then from there, going into like the sci-fi graphic novels and eventually the gothic novellas, it was just very organic. It just felt like I wanted to keep challenging myself and really falling in love with the craft. And it kind of came a little bit more naturally to me, in the sense that it just felt like coming home. Like I was like, oh man, I should have started doing this 10 years ago. At least in a proper sense, but but now it's one of the most relaxing things I get to do on a day-to-day basis is sitting down and writing, you know.
Pretty cool. Now, writing for children, how do you sort of you don't want to dumb things down for kids because they'll pick up on that, but you don't want to go over their heads as well. How do you find that sort of medium that something they can relate to?
I think for us, having a kid, I was like, I get to read my kid a story every night, sometimes 10 times over if he really likes it.
Mhm.
And you realize very quickly that you want to take something away from the story yourself as a parent, that either you can relate to, you could kind of chuckle at, or you think is a lesson to learn within it. So for us, we want to respect our readers, especially kids. Kids are brutally honest. They don't like something or they don't feel you're sincere, they'll tell you.
Mhm.
So for us, it was like, let's just write a good story. And then realistically, all we did to make it a kid's story, we made it rhyme. We threw in some fun characters. but we didn't dumb it down. We just shortened it up, really.
Mm.
We just didn't use as big of words. But realistically, I mean, some of our kids' books, one in particular, The Wind or Friend of the Wind, could just be a poem in general. But we turned it into a kid's book because it had characters in it that um, wanted to jump off the page.
Now, for Caleb, when you're doing the art for this,
Mhm.
is your art, is that the art that you would naturally do, or do you sort of adapt your art to fit for a younger audience?
Yeah, good question. So if you had asked me that several years ago, I would have said that I was adapting. But very shortly after doing our first book, I realized how much more natural that felt, like doing more cartoony characters, kind of, I don't know, there was a freedom with it. Sitting down, drawing a monster eating colors or a hamster going on adventures, there was so much freedom with it that I could, exaggerate the expressions and use the bright colors and just like do whatever I wanted to tell the story. I didn't have to kind of confine myself in a certain space, like you kind of have to do if you're telling a more realistic story. So it was really fun just to have that imagination and find that freedom with it. So now it comes very, very natural to me to do the children's books. And it's kind of fun because I've gotten to kind of dip my toe back into the more realistic stuff a little bit as we evolve with our audience, as we grow with them, as we do the young adult reader sci-fi novels, which are, geared more towards like 10 and up in a children's audience. And I'm able to make those characters a little more realistic, a little bit, have more of an edge to them. So it's really fun that I get to go back and forth between all these different styles and really just draw whatever I want and whatever I feel would be interesting to the reader, no matter the age, and to help tell a good story. The hopefully good stories that he gives me.
Now, are you also the colorist, inker, as well as being the penciler?
I am. Yeah, I do all of it myself. I try to be a jack of all trades and learn all the different processes and everything. And it's been a blast. Like I have fun with every part of it. And it's also great just collaborating with him because we can have that constant back and forth bouncing off of each other. Just, oh, what do you think of this? Oh, how do you like the look of this character? So it's fun to kind of have that second perspective there. But yeah, I do all the artwork, except for the graphic novellas. Those are actually his babies. And he does the artwork for those. So he started getting into drawing a little bit. And he found this just like really unique style that I've just been kind of able to watch him and be like, oh yeah, that's really cool, man. That has a neat look to it. Put that on a book.
It's one thing folks don't realize is that Scholastic, with their kids and young adults graphic novels, they're outselling DC and Marvel
Mhm.
by ridiculous amounts. Why do you think this young audience is sort of gravitating towards graphic novels?
Hmm.
I think in this generation, especially, I kind of look at books as like a tablet that won't die, you know? Um, so with that, I think that's why we see a resurgence in books now and graphic novels and stories, is because you can have a full story in the palm of your hand. And if the power goes out, you still have it there. If you're in the car and you have no service, the story's still there. Um, and so I've seen, which is really good to see. When we first started doing this 6 years ago, I was kind of worried that the time for books had passed. You never know. You just see it with other mediums going digitally and so on and so forth. But like, if anything, in the last 6 years, we've seen it just continue to grow, and people just really they want to hold that book in their hands. And kids especially gravitate towards full stories. Um, and it's something that's theirs. It's something that we can sign, we can meet them, we can take a picture with them. I met the guys that made this. And I think that's something too with outside of, the Marvel and DC comic universe and all that stuff, is that a lot of the smaller publishers or creatives that are putting out graphic novels and so on are a little bit more within your grasp as a reader. You can meet them, you can go to the conventions, you can really talk to them. It's not just a corporate entity that this person worked on this and this person worked on this and this guy inked this, and a lot of times the person who drew it also wrote it.
Mhm.
In a lot of cases, there's like, it's a very small team that works on these. And so you can meet the artist and the writer and the inker and all of it, and it might be just one person sitting there selling their own stuff. And I think that's really cool for an audience nowadays.
Makes sense. You just said something that was really interesting about the kids wanting a complete story. Do you think the days of like when we were growing up, buying issues for a story arc, individual issues is sort of bygones at this point? People just want to they'll wait for the whole thing to be put together instead of having to buy and wait, a month for each issue.
I think so. In a lot of ways, I think it has to do with like streaming,
Mhm.
right? Like binge watching. We've become so attuned to the idea that a new season of whatever show is on TV, and with some exceptions, usually if it's through a digital marketplace, it all drops on one day, a lot of times. And I can binge a whole series in a weekend, a whole new season. And so that immediate being able to read story to story to story to story, I think is really appealing to a younger generation, just people in general too, to be like, I look at some of my comic book collections where I have to go back and try to find like back issues. And maybe it's a run of like 13 issues or something like that, but I can't find 7 anywhere. And I have to order it off Amazon, and it's all crusted up and doesn't not in great shape, and I have to pay, $30 for this one thing just to figure out what happened between the 2 issues. Sometimes that's just like not the funnest thing in the world. Like, it's cool to have it, but at the same point, I also have runs of different comics that I have sitting there and I haven't even read them. I've collected them. I have them there, but I haven't read them. I spent so much time trying to find all, 30 issues or whatever in the volume, that now I'm like, okay, one of these days I'm gonna go back and read it. Versus you go get a graphic novel, you just go, all right, and you just knock it out.
All in one shot. For you guys as independent creators, how are you getting your name out there? Because it's a crowded field now, especially on social media. Everyone has a Kickstarter or GoFundMe. They're putting out their own stuff. How do you get your name out there and try to separate yourselves?
That's definitely a challenge for sure. It's a double-edged sword of nowadays it's easier than ever for anyone to put out their product, put out their art. All you have to do is create it, get it done, and then you can just put it out there, and it takes 2 seconds and it's free most of the time. From there, it's really just about how much time do you want to spend promoting it? And that's something that we're still trying to figure out. We are definitely more creatives than we are promoters.
We're getting there.
But we're slowly learning, and it's just about finding your avenue. For us, we love meeting people. We love meeting people in person. We love going to conventions. We love, meeting people and talking about our books and about ourselves, and just showing people what we've done. And that's kind of been the funnest part for us. We are on social media, we are online, and we're slowly starting to get a small presence there. But it is something that you just kind of tackle as a puzzle, just like one step at a time, and just kind of shooting your shot wherever you can and seeing what works for you and learning along the way.
Mhm. And the response at the cons of people coming up has been very positive. Folks really, enjoying what you guys are doing.
It has.
Yeah.
It's been so much fun. Like that's one of our favorite ways to spend a weekend is going to a convention. And if we can get someone that comes up to us that maybe we met like at the same convention last year, and they come up to us and they say, "Oh yeah, I remember you two guys. I bought that book from you. Do you have the next issue? Do you have the next volume?" And we're like, "Oh, that is just like the best feeling in the world. Like, so you enjoyed it. You didn't throw it in the trash. Great. Here's the next one."
Well, it's an interesting thing when you're writing and illustrating books is that instant validation isn't there for you. If you write a song, it's 3 minutes long. Someone can give you 3 minutes of their time and say, I like that song. Or a movie, they can, watch 2 hours and say, I like that movie. With certain books, like outside of our kids' books, some of them we're asking people to spend several hours a weekend, a week on. So these kids walk away with, maybe one of our sci-fi novels. We don't know right then if they like it. So if they come back the next year and say, oh, I want the second and the third one and the figure and the sticker and whatever the case, that's a lot of validation for us, which I think every creative kind of craves a little bit of validation to know they're not wasting their time.
Right.
And we're not the only ones that think it's good, So that's the really cool thing with the convention is really being able to meet people and talk to them and see the same people again and again and again and come back and say, what do you have that's new? Or maybe their kids started out with the kids' books and now their kids are 11 years old and they're moving on to the graphic novels. Or beyond that, maybe they're moving now to like the Gothic mysteries, or maybe the parents buy the Gothic mysteries and the kids get the kids' books and the teenager gets the graphic novel, and suddenly you have a household that has 10 of your books in it, and you kind of made your mark on the family, and it's a pretty cool feeling.
I want to talk specifically about some books in a moment, but just to follow up on what you guys just said, could you see a pivot if you just start seeing that the sci-fi stuff is really getting hot, focusing on that, or do you want to continue, sort of the bigger rounded group of books?
I think for us, we like having thus far the three genres, the three age groups, because the interesting thing with readers is they grow up, they get older, their tastes change. And so we have seen certain genres or certain books that outsell others by a lot. But it also depends on the convention we're doing. We'll go into some conventions and the kids' books are just the only thing selling, right? We do others where it is only the sci-fi really, and it kind of depends on the age range that you're bringing in there. So for us, unless it was like national notoriety of like, top 10 bestseller, but even at that point, like I feel that there's a need and a want for different genres and different ages that it's fun for us to write because like it's not as much work for us to do a kids book, but the fans of the kids book are a lot cooler to talk to than the other age ranges because they're kids. Kids are cool. They'll laugh at it, they'll point at it, they'll tell you their favorite part. Oh, I love it when this happens and da 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 da. And there's not that predetermined sense of I have to be an adult, I have to be a grown up talking to you about a book. They're just open and awesome and brutally honest. And so that's something that's kind of cool. So although we aren't focusing on writing the kids' books as much now, because we have a lot of them, it's still something that's in the back of our mind of like, we'd like to do one every couple of years or something like that to add to the collection.
So now I came across My Dad the Dork. I saw someone had posted it on Facebook, and I said, let me get this because I get called these names with my children as well. And I was so wonderfully surprised on what just a fantastic story it is, really about parents and children spending time together and growing the imagination and just having that relationship. How did that book kind of come about, and is it based on your guys' real childhood?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Very, very, very much so. The book almost wrote itself in that sense. It's really based on both of us growing up, our dad taking us to like Comic Cons and collecting Star Wars toys in the box and getting to meet so and so. Our dad is the dork. And then as I had a kid, like I found myself very much the same. I now all of a sudden I'm dad the dork. But I think that it really came out of the title. I think that's really where the book started is we wanted to do a love letter to nerd culture and Comic Cons and all those little like inroads of the the adult teenager, kind of thing. And I think one of us had come up with My Dad the Dork, and we just thought that was a fun name um, for a book, and it just kind of took off from there. And but yeah, every page of it, there's so much that reminds me of us growing up with our dad, whether it was embarrassing moments of him wearing something in public that you just go, "Oh my gosh, Dad, what are you doing?" Or him picking up a toy and looking at the crease in it and being like, I don't know. And I remember at one point growing up getting into some of my dad's Star Wars toys and like opening them up. I was really young, I didn't know.
Oh, jeez.
And just playing with them. And he found out, and to his credit, he was pretty cool about it because he was like, well, they're toys. But in the back of his mind, I'm sure he was like, no. But that's just kind of the household we grew up in, is that we were always very accepting of that culture and that, just creativity, being creatives and loving creatives and showing respect for that entire world.
Yeah. And artistically, there was so many, it seemed like to me, Easter eggs that were there. Little things that I could tell, okay, that was definitely, you can tell this is based on a real story for little things there. How fun was it to put all that in from memory?
Oh gosh, it was so much fun. That was one of my favorite books to work on because I spent so much time on that. There's especially a couple pages where like the kid and the dad first enter the convention hall and you just see, all these people in costume and all the vendors and all the posters and everything. And I just had a blast going through and just putting in, references and Easter eggs to all of my favorite childhood genres and characters and comics, and it was just so much fun to go through, and that's especially been fun to see people's reaction because we will get people come up to us and say, hey, that little teeny tiny drawing in the background there, is that supposed to be, yep, you found it, you got it. And is that an off-brand version of, yep, you saw it.
Yep.
And that's kind of what we love to do with all of our books, is we love to put enough care and attention to detail in it that anyone of any age can read through it. And if they just take a moment to kind of look at the artwork or pay attention, they can kind of see like, oh, look, they snuck that little like inside joke in there, or that funny little character in the background. And we try to do that all the time so that, like he said, as a parent or a kid reads through the books 10, 20, 30 times, hopefully every time they can discover something new in it.
Yep. And I want now to Sammy the Hamster. Where does this begin, and how far ahead did you have sort of stories based for him?
Oh, that was a long time coming. Yeah. So as kids, we both had hamsters growing up. And I think both of our hamsters like escaped from their cages at some point or another. And surprisingly, we would always find them like later on. And so as a kid, you of course imagine like, oh, I wonder what they did all that time. So it's funny that like then years and years later as adults, that just kind of, I don't even know how we came up with the idea exactly or what we were talking about, but it just kind of organically happened of, what would be a cute book, what would be a fun book is like, remember when the hamsters escaped and they came back? Let's make that into a book.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been one of the funnest parts of this whole journey, is just coming up with those ideas just out of nowhere about something that we know, something that we're passionate about, or just something fun and funny that happened that we can actually just make into a story that hopefully other people can get a kick out of and enjoy.
Well, I think for me, when I was writing Sammy the Hamster, part of the challenge and part of the fun part was to write something so outlandish and strange on each page just to make him draw it.
Oh, yeah.
I was just like, good luck, buddy. Have fun with that.
Is there a book, and this is for each of you, that you worked on that you really felt like you were firing on all cylinders? Like, what's a sort of a favorite for each of you?
You go first.
For me personally, it would be the third volume of Zed and Zia. Yeah, so we've been working very, very hard on this whole series. We've got roughly about a 6 book plan. So it's a big story. It's very heavily inspired by, like, the Star Wars universe or Star Trek or the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We wanted to do something that has that big story, that big overarching plot, and all of these characters that come together. And I feel like with every book that we work on with that, they just get better and better and more epic. And I think that's kind of the thing as an artist. Like, the last thing that I create is always going to be my favorite because I've improved, because I've learned something new. My passion grows for it. So a year from now, my answer will probably change, hopefully, to whatever the last thing is that we release. So yeah, currently I love the story and the characters that we've created thus far. And I'm always very, very excited to keep going with it.
Yeah. I think for me, um, probably going to be this book called Good Bird. So that's one of our, I guess, gothic mystery novellas, more for adults. Um, but I wrote it about my son.
Mhm.
And so whenever you do something personal, um, it definitely kind of goes right to the top of your list, right? And it was just one of the easiest things. I think I wrote it over 3 weeks.
Mhm.
It was a really quick write. Um, the word just kind of flew. I knew exactly where I wanted to go with it. Had a lot of fun doing the artwork. But it also kind of transcended to the point where you could be a kid and read it as well. It's not overtly adult at all. It's more like a bedtime story about a bird that can't fly and a boy that can't talk, and they befriend each other and kind of go on adventures. Very whimsical. So for me, that's just my personal favorite because I'm biased because it has to do with my kid. So as a creative, you always kind of gravitate towards what's the most personal to me.
Mhm. It seems like with a lot of these stories, a lot of it is based on personal things you guys grew up with, and it seems like that's a wonderful resource to sort of dip into in order to create.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I think that all of the best stories do come from some kind of personal place.
Mhm.
If you write about something that you're passionate about or draw something or characters that you yourself can relate to. I mean, even our most cartoony characters, I draw them in a way that I feel like I know them. I feel like they're almost like a friend of mine where I'm like, oh yeah, this character, they're not a drawing, they're real, like
Mhm.
you have that feeling of just a passion and an understanding. And if you put that into your work, then the hope is that other people will see that, will relate to that, and see that, oh, this isn't just something that was, put out there just as a product. It is a character, it is a story, and it is something that definitely means something to us as the creators and will hopefully mean something to the readers as well.
So I have a question about Zed and Zia for you, Nathan. As a writer, you guys said you want to keep it at 6 books. How do you sort of channel to keep it, reduce it to just 6 books, or to stretch out the story to meet 6 books?
Hmm.
So a lot of that came from a lot of late nights of us talking
Mhm.
and just talking about each character and the journey we wanted them to take and all the places we wanted them to go. And we just kind of came to a natural place of like, this is the full story. These are the trials we want each character to go through, and how long is that going to take?
Mhm.
I like to put a limit on things when you're telling one story. I think anything beyond that can kind of leave the reader a little unsatisfied in the point because it's like the Game of Thrones thing. How does Game of Thrones end? If you're reading the novels,
Mhm.
no one knows, and we might not never know, right? Because certain people take 14 years to write a book. Um, but for us, we really wanted to say, okay, this is the story arc we want to go to. So from the time we were doing the first book, um, to now we're working on the fourth book. We knew where each book was going to go, not perfectly, and we're still changing things as we go, and adapting things. But we had a pretty good idea of where we wanted each book to go, what we wanted to happen as a core element in each book. mainly because we thought that would be fun. We want this book to be this thing where they separate and go this way, and this one is going to be a centralized story about this person, and this one we're going to go all wacky and weird with, and then this one's going to be like, you know, the end game of Zed and Zia where all these things happen, and just setting up those elements, kind of like playing a game of chess or something, almost is just a lot of fun. And in fact, like all those late night conversations, I forget a lot of it, and he remembers, which is funny because I'll be writing the story for the next book, and he'll be like, "Yeah, but you said you were going to do this." Like, "Oh yeah, oops," you know, I have to go back and change something. Um, so it's really great to have that like eidetic memory sitting right next to me, just being like, "Hey, you said this thing was going to happen. That's a big payoff," and I have to go back and do
I'm
it.
excited to draw this thing, so you better write it that way.
Yep, absolutely. But yeah, I think also just as a challenge for us to just be like, we're gonna do a 6 book series, and we have plans outside of that to maybe do some spin-offs or some fun things from it. But for us, I think it was just like, let's create this universe, let's create this story, and then let's see what else is in our future. You know, it's still a long endeavor, several years, but yeah, it's been a blast though. It's been a lot of fun.
And for both of you, when you're creating a character, what do you start with? Is it a look, a name, sort of a personal characteristic? Where do you build off from?
Um, so for me, a lot of it's going to be personality based.
Okay.
Um, and also what purpose does the character serve to the story? Are they the comical sidekick? Are they the love interest? Are they the villain? Are they the hero, you know, the main protagonist? Like what's their part of the story? And also like writing them as if we teach a class on creative writing here locally, and one of the things we focus on for writing dialogue and characters is to make sure the character doesn't sound too much like you for every character, because then you end up in a room where a bunch of you is just talking to yourself. So giving them each their own tone, their own drive. And then from there, we'll discuss it a little bit, but I kind of let Caleb do his own thing because he can read the dialogue and he'll say, what kind of character is this? I'll be like, oh, well, they're kind of this charming giant that's, you know, you would be intimidated of at first, but they actually sound like this and they're this and that. And he'll go, okay. And then he'll just kind of do his thing. And normally he'll send me like 4 or 5 different designs and say, hey, which do you like? And we'll say, well, this one with a bit of this one or whatever. We'll kind of mix it together and we'll just talk about it. A lot of it. And he'll call me out in my writing too and be like, hey, I noticed on this page this character says this. They would never say that. What are you doing? That's not how they're written. Can you imagine? And so I have to go back and fix that. But we're very both like Caleb was saying, you work on these characters and these creatures or whatever, and they kind of come to life off the page. You really start to know them to the point where it's kind of interesting. You read the character as if they're your neighbor. Like you really know the character. You know their personality. You know how they react to every situation in your life, and they become really real to you. So it makes it a lot easier to write them and draw them as you go through the process because they really do breathe, you know, in your mind.
Yeah, for me, I think one of the funnest parts that I have drawing and creating the characters is I love to, of course, make each character different and have their own look, their own voice. And I also love to subvert expectations. I love to make the characters that are very nice and kind of sweet, you know, have a little bit of edge to their look, or maybe the villains have kind of a softness to them at first. So I love playing with that and kind of making the readers guess a little bit. And it makes the characters feel more real that way. You know, there's a reason why the villains in comics and movies are always kind of the more interesting because they have a bit of grit to them. They have flaws. They have something that pulls your interest to them. They're not perfect, and I love giving each character kind of their own flaws and quirks. And for me, it's also just about being actually just a fan of his writing. Like that's kind of been the funnest part for me is, we all, as an artist, I aspire to draw the things that I'm passionate about, and every artist does. That's why so many artists start with drawing fan art of their favorite characters. They want to be a part of something that they love. So for us, like reading his writing and his books and characters, I just legitimately became a fan of them. And that's why with the Zed and Zia books, those actually started out. Those were supposed to just be just your standard novels. And he came to me and said, "Hey, can you put a little drawing of the characters like at the beginning of each chapter, just a chapter header?" And then once I started reading and started drawing, I became such a big fan of the characters that I wanted to see all the action and all the creatures leap off the page. And I knew that other people would want to see that too. So for me, I'm just like, I came to him and I said, "Hey, look, I want to draw everything. I know it's a big project and kind of, unique, but I want to take this on. I want to just really delve into this universe and have fun with it."
Now, just a fantasy question. Any comic company, DC, Marvel, Image, whoever, comes to
Mhm.
you guys and says, "Who do you want? What are you going to go with?"
Oh, good question. I mean, I think we're both kind of Marvel fanboys, to be honest. I definitely grew up with like, watching and reading Spider-Man. That's never really gone away. So I mean, Marvel's a biggie. But I mean, if any company, comes to us and wants to hire us on,
I think it would be God, it'd be a tricky thing, but one of two things. I'd either want to do something totally original
Mhm,
that's totally separate from everything we've done and just do something unique.
mhm,
Here's an idea for a hero or this or that or whatever.
mhm,
Um, or like it would be fun a little bit to like take on an existing property
mhm.
and kind of have our way with it. Um, kind of depends on but like I would love to have like some kind of run of like Guardians or something like that.
Mhm.
Like to me, that's just like it feels like home. Like those are one of my favorite like comics and movies, and just it's that dysfunctional family.
Mhm.
How fun would it be to just like do like a version of that, or something? But that's kind of the fun thing when you start like looking at these properties is like you could take any character, and if you love to create and you're passionate about creating, um, you could make any character quote unquote cooler
Mhm.
or more to your liking, or go fun places with it. So for me, it would probably be it would have to be something cosmically big though.
Mhm.
I don't think we're the team to like be like we're gonna do the next Daredevil kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like
A more aggressive.
gritty down to the street level. Like there's got to be some spaceships involved or some superpowers for sure. So
Mhm. Definitely.
So you guys mentioned you're on social media. Where can fans find you? Where can people learn more about what you guys are doing in upcoming conventions, stuff like that?
Yeah, currently we have our own website, first of all, harmspublications.com. If you want to see just a list of everything that we've done, that's the best place to go. We've got all of our books categorized on there, from our kids' books, our young adult readers, his gothic novellas. So we have something for every age. You can also find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at insert social media name here, Harms Publications. And then we sell all of our books through Amazon as well. So they are all very easily obtainable. And we would love to hear from anyone what they think about them.
And we are back. Such nice guys. I wish them all the success in the world. I can't wait to see what they're going to do next. It's really interesting to hear, how one brother is more into sort of the books for the older teens, one's more for the younger teens. But they work together so well, and it's really such an interesting world to see independent creators, people, working outside the box and putting out their ideas and their stories. And fans are loving it. And so, guys, I wish you the best. Can't wait to have you on again to talk some more when you have new projects coming out. And please, 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 guys, go to Amazon, check out what they have. And Father's Day is not too far away. Pick up My Dad the Dork. Get it for yourself, get it for your family, your friends, whoever you want. You're going to love this book. I promise you, you're going to love this book. So, enough of us. We will see you guys next week. Remember, rate, review, subscribe.